Here we go. I've genuinely put off filming this review for a good few days. Normally I film the Doctor Who Series 12 reviews on a Wednesday. It is now a Sunday because I've just been put off talking about this story. Given the episode's context, I kind of feel like regardless of what side of the boundary you are on, either if you like it or you absolutely hate it, there will kind of be arguments on either side. For once, this episode is in an unusual place where I kind of understand where both the fans who hate it are coming from, but also the fans who absolutely loved it are coming from, and I'm kind of teetering between both sides. I certainly don't hate it. There's a few parts of the story that I dislike. However, for the most part, I did enjoy this series finale. It is definitely a massive upgrade compared to the previous series finale, being the Battle of Ranskoor av Kalos, which, to be honest, I don't think is really saying much, because that is probably the worst series finale in the entire history of Doctor Who. It just wasn't a series finale whatsoever. This story kind of embraces Doctor Who history, and I must admit, once again, if you came to me in Doctor Who Series 11 and said that the next series was going to be talking about the origins of Time Lord Society, Gallifrey, and the general history of the show, I would certainly think you were making it up, because compared to Doctor Who Series 11, we definitely weren't going down that path. It was going to be an era about new beginnings, and I suppose in a way Chibnall has kind of took this series down a more origin style route, because yes, it is in a way a new beginning, because you are creating kind of a new origin for the Doctor and Gallifrey, and introducing that possibly through the eyes of a new viewer. So a new viewer who's just came onto Doctor Who in the past few years could very easily watch this story and understand it without needing the vast backlog of Doctor Who's history and the context of it. Yes, there is a few references in there to the classic series of Doctor Who, however this story isn't 100% reliant in that previous pre-existing history of Gallifrey and society, which I suppose I'm kind of grateful for this story for doing. It's kind of embracing the past but creating a new beginning at the same time. So without further ado, and for the last time for this current review series, let's take a look at another episode of Doctor Who Series 12, this time around The Timeless Children, as written by Chris Chibnall. The series finale, we are finally here, and it was an odd one. So before we delve into this actual episode, I would just like to give a reminder, as per usual, this video will of course contain my own personal opinions. Some of those opinions you may agree with, some of which you may disagree with. Either way, I don't mind. Why not leave in the comment section below your general review of this story? What did you like and dislike? Please be respecting of other people's opinions, because we are all different people and we all like different things, and that is generally the way that we have a civil society, by appreciating other people's opinions and getting along with our day-to-day lives without causing stupid arguments every 5 seconds. In other words, the whole basis of Twitter. So yeah, just be respecting, just be nice. I will respect your opinions as long as you respect mine, and yeah, let's just all be nice, please. And I do of course also recommend checking out my previous episode review of the last story, Ascension of the Cybermen, because this story basically follows on from that. It's kind of a two-parter slash three-parter if you bring in the haunting of Villa Diodati. I have reviewed all of this season either way, so I just recommend checking out those reviews in order to get my general opinion of the series as a whole. So naturally, in the previous review I did of course state a few pieces of criteria that I kind of hoped this story would do. In some ways I was right, and in some ways I was wrong. To start off with, the biggest wrong, I suppose, is the death of a companion. I was hoping, as well as predicting, that a companion was going to die in this story, and to be honest, I'm kind of annoyed that nobody did die in this episode. I kind of felt like it was working up to that, and it has been a long known thing now within these reviews. I do not really appreciate the current TARDIS team. I think that the very number of this TARDIS team being 3 whole companions, plus the Doctor, and for the most part of the vast majority of stories we have a few introductory characters that are brought in as well. There is too many people in order to give detailed character development of every single companion and make them all interesting. We've had the movement of Yaz's character and Graham's character throughout this series, however Ryan still doesn't really have too much to do, sadly, and I think that he has fell victim simply due to the large cast list of the vast majority of the stories within this series. So yeah, I was hoping for a companion death. We didn't get that. It is a little bit annoying. leaving. After the airing of the story, I do believe it was also confirmed on BBC Radio 2, Graham will apparently be leaving in the next story, the festive episode, whatever that is supposed to mean. It'll probably be Christmas, New Year, or running up to Christmas, who knows. And I am kind of grateful that a companion is inevitably leaving, and I'm going to post a prediction that basically Graham is going to leave alongside Ryan. Ryan is going to leave in some extent, it may be willingly, or maybe even he gets killed, who knows. But either way, probably the ending of that story is going to see the 13th Doctor and Yaz going off together, and I just have a feeling that within the first episode of the next series they're going to introduce once again another companion, which I do not want. I just want the 13th Doctor and Yaz together, because then, especially given some of the background that we've got within Can You Hear Me, it would be nice to expand on this character a bit more and give her something to do. However, I do think they're going to bring on another companion, which will once again will basically be back to square one probably, which is a little bit of a shame. Or maybe even bring back a certain penguin that's a shapeshifter, and then it can be the 13th Doctor, Yaz and Frobisher, but I give up. I've lost hope by this point. The thing that I did kind of also predict within the previous review is that the Cyberman plot would kind of be shelved, which I suppose I was right in that, because we had the current Cyberman plot that was in Ascension of the Cybermen kind of being sidetracked, and we had the Master coming in and kind of taking over, becoming the new leader, and then having a new idea of how he was going to process the Cybermen. It was essentially the latest baddie coming in, taking over the other baddie and getting rid of the previous baddie. So we had the death of the lone Cyberman, which once more I was kind of expecting from this story, and it made sense that the Master just came along and kind of ended him, even though the previous stories that were building him up to be such a big force, and he was kind of gone like that. It did seem a little bit easy, but at the same time I didn't really expect nothing more from this story. I was definitely expecting it to do that. We had of course the Gallifrey Cyberman stuff, the Cybermasters, which is a controversial idea. However, I do believe it was done within the 12th Doctor comics, not that long ago in fact, just before the 12th Doctor did leave the show, and it's kind of one of those things that if any Time Lords were going to kind of ally themselves with a popular monster in Doctor Who, I could kind of see it be the Cybermen, kind of creating a cybernetic version of Time Lord. It does kind of, on the face of it, sound like a good idea. However, I kind of feel like in this story we are quite possibly only seeing the beginnings of that, and we may see them return within a future story. Who knows, but it's just an odd one. Of course, we have the Master in there as well, as portrayed by Sacha Dhawan, which it was nice to see him back. Once again, I was expecting it, given, of course, the climax of the previous story. However, it would make sense to make him return, given that he was in the first episode of the series, and it was kind of leading up to the Gallifrey stuff and him blowing up Gallifrey, which you've not seen. I'm kind of hoping that we get to see a Doctor-like story, especially given how much potential that Sacha has as the Master. I would love to see them go rather left field and have an episode which doesn't feature the Doctor in whatsoever, and we have a story focused around the Master, him going to Gallifrey, finding out this stuff within the Matrix, and then basically blowing up Gallifrey. I would like to see kind of the pre-existing history that this episode is kind of building on, the Master reacting to what he's found out within the Matrix and then blowing up Gallifrey as a result. It would be nice to see that on screen eventually, as opposed to it just being referred to. For the most part though, I think that Sacha Dhawan's Master was once again incredibly effective. We did have vibes in there, I felt, of the War Master. He's quite psychopathic, he can be quite dark, however lovable at the same time. I love the little joke to the oh, I'll throw out the red carpet, it's red because it is the blood of the dead Time Lords or something like that. It was great, and once again I could imagine the War Master saying something very similar. So the very fact that I'm seeing parallels between my favourite incarnation of the Master and Sacha Dhawan's Master is a good sign, and I hope to see more of him in the future, possibly developing on the plot that we've seen throughout this story. Then we have the companions, which for a series finale we didn't really have too much with them at all. Ryan did get some things to do, which was nice. We had him of course blowing up some Cybermen. That was quite short-lived. We have him kind of being a warrior, which who knows, maybe he might fall into that same category within the next story, the festive special. Then as a result that may backfire and you might get shot by a Dalek or something like that. That would be quite cool. However, Yaz and Graham of course did disguise themselves as Cybermen and then got out of the Cyberman spaceship relationship, and other than that they didn't really do much. They were kind of in the background because this story was solely focused around Gallifrey and the Time Lords and the Doctor and the Master, which I do understand. Once again, it is building on the relationship that the Doctor and the Master has, and as a result of that the companions fall victim, which if this was within the vast majority of other eras in the show, I wouldn't really care that much, but because we have companions that aren't really developed as it is, it would have just been nice to maybe see a bit more of them, give them a job to do, make them more exciting, as opposed to just being almost background characters. For Seamus, on the other hand, I really did like his contribution for this story. I was expecting him to be a little bit more. I was in fact expecting him to be a previous existing incarnation of the Ruth Doctor timeline. However, that didn't come into fruition in the end, sadly, but he did do a very good job. I certainly liked his character. He felt rather well-rounded, and I kind of felt like I knew a decent amount about him in order to kind of like his role and where his came from and what kind of fueled his motives at the end of the story to kind of destroy the Cybermen. Here we go then, the Timeless Child, Gallifrey history. What do I think of all of this stuff? As I mentioned at the start of the review, it was very evident that this story was going to play with Gallifrey's past. This story does that, and we have a development of the Doctor that we kind of seen coming but kind of didn't at the same time. I think that as soon as the Tecta-Un subplot came in and we had her kind of finding the child beneath this portal, at that moment it was very obvious that that child was going to be the Doctor, the way that it was kind of being set out, and when it did eventually happen, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I knew that, because you could see it kind of coming due to the way that that pre-existing plot was set up. The whole idea of Tecta-Un was quite unusual. Of course, it was basically just the Master reeling off a backstory and exposition, and it was just getting the plot going, essentially. And because of the way it was delivered, that was kind of disguised quite well. I thought it was an unusual choice to just have Tecta-Un by herself and not actually having anything to speak verbally, and it was just the Master kind of speaking over the top of her, which I thought was unusual. Of course, we didn't really have too much else of early Gallifreyan society. We have the suggestion of 3 sort of Time Lord neck brace things, which could maybe suggest Tecta-Un, Rassilon, Omega, is it in the other? No, that's 4. Maybe Tecta-Un's Omega, who knows. But yeah, we have 3 people, which could suggest kind of the beginnings of time travel and regeneration. Of course, this whole concept that the Doctor is now from another universe or another planet or another somewhere, it's an unusual idea. However, I think that Doctor Who has always been suggesting that the Doctor is more than just a Time Lord. The 7th Doctor did also suggest that he's kind of more than just any other Time Lord. I think that was in remembrance of the Daleks or Silver Nemesis, and of course with the 7th Doctor era, if the series didn't get axed, we were heading for that almost origin story. Which brings me to a point in the review where I basically say that Chris Chibnall's ideas are all recycled. We had the idea of Graham and Yaz escaping from the cyber spaceship by disguising themselves as Cybermen. Attack of the Cybermen. We had Fugitive of the Judoon, which had a lot of parallels with Utopia. This story also had quite a few Utopia-esque vibes, of course having this vortex and people travelling to this possible happy future, of course as seen with an ascension of the Cybermen. Then we have the whole Cyber Time Lord thing that has been seen within the comics. Then we have, I do believe, a few ideas, literally a few quotes basically extracted directly out of Last of the Time Lords and the End of Time, for like the end of time itself. I think for the end of the universe itself, there was that stuff. And then the whole concept and foundation of the Timeless Child, from what I can see, is basically the whole idea of the subplot of the 7th Doctor, which I have been referring to throughout this series of reviews. I have been saying how the 7th Doctor is kind of paralleling the 13th Doctor. We have this happy beginning, as seen throughout Doctor Who Series 11, and we are now starting to see those darker sides of the Doctor coming out, very much like how we've seen within the journey of the 7th Doctor. So in that case, it will be absolutely brilliant to see Sylvester McCoy come back as the 7th Doctor, because I actually think he could do it. I know there was a few years ago a photo shoot of him basically in costume, and I think that he could reprise the role with very little effort. I think they could just spray his hair a little bit, make it a bit more coloured and padded out, and I think he could work. I honestly think they could bring back Sylvester McCoy and maybe just have a throwaway line as to why his face is slightly older, who knows, time distortions, like how they did within Time Crash, but it could work. But what I'm getting at is the timeless child idea and the origins of Gallifrey, the origins of time travel, the origins of regeneration were all planned to be done within the 7th Doctor era, and that idea has just been grabbed out of that and basically put within the 13th Doctor era. And then of course we have that I don't like the fact that there's other Doctors before William Hartnell, which I get, because oddly I get and I don't get, and I think that is once again down to the writing of this story. We have this timeline that is suggesting that Tecta-Un's child doesn't refer to herself as the Doctor. She is basically another Time Lord completely, who constantly regenerates after Tecta-Un does constantly experiment on her. I thought that it was a rather brushed over remark that Tecta-Un is just experimenting on a child and kind of making her regenerate all the time. Bit dark, it happened apparently. And then we have that whole concept of course, Tecta-Un developing, the creation of the division, and of course the Irish kind of subplot being a mirror that is placed over the division plot in order to disguise it within the Matrix. Understand all of that. To this point we essentially do not have the Doctor, we have another Time Lord entirely that is probably going by a different name. Who knows, perhaps it's the other. And then we have the idea of the Ruth Doctor, which at the current time is possibly suggesting that she is one of those characters that Tecta-Un regenerates her child into, but then we have the problem that she refers to herself as the Doctor, and she has a police public call box, which once again isn't ringing true within the history of the show. So perhaps she is a Doctor between the 2nd and 3rd incarnation. I do believe they refer to it as Season 6B. Perhaps she's something between the War Games and Spearhead from Space. We are yet to see on TV. Perhaps that is the thing that we're referring to within the later half of this story, the bit that the 13th Doctor doesn't understand, that there is more to this plot that we haven't seen already. We have the origin story that is taking place prior to the 1st Doctor, then we have the Doctor occurring, the 1st and 2nd Doctor, and then we have the Time Lords possibly coming back once again, maybe the Division, maybe the Celestial Intervention Agency, and then once again tampering with the Doctor's timeline in order to create the Ruth Doctor. But from what I'm understanding is we have this character who is Tecta-Un's child, who eventually does become the 1st Doctor as a result of his brain being wiped in the Irish subplot thing. Therefore the 1st Doctor is still the 1st Doctor because he is unaware of anything happening before that. So he is still William Hartnell's 1st Doctor, escaping Gallifrey. Who knows, maybe that is why he had the inkling to escape Gallifrey, because of the subplot of the Timeless Child, and kind of how it does tie in. I'm just not quite sure if I like it. It's kind of like, I've always appreciated the 1st Doctor being the beginnings of Doctor Who, and people were saying that the Time Lords and the history of the Doctor has kind of become not that mysterious over the past few years, which admittedly is simply down to Stephen Moffat and Russell T Davies, and the fact that we now have the Doctor coming from another dimension is more mysterious and better, I suppose. However, I'm not quite seeing that yet. I kind of feel like we're going to need to have more development of this plot in order for me to respect it a bit more as an original origin for the show, because to me, although we have this whole concept of the Doctor coming from another dimension, it still doesn't make it mysterious. We have the origins of the other dimension being mysterious, however that whole origin leading up to the character that we know as the Doctor, if anything, is getting more development because we are kind of seeing that run-up to the 1st Doctor occurring. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Why not leave in the comment section below what you think, because that is kind of the reaction that I'm having to this episode. I'm certainly not one of the end of the spectrum that is claiming that Chibnall has ruined Doctor Who entirely because Tom Baker is no longer the 4th Doctor and William Hartnell is no longer the 1st Doctor and David Warner still hasn't been canonised. Okay, that is probably my criticism added on at the end, but it's certainly not as extreme and big and groundbreaking as some of the media is portraying, and certainly some of the more extreme criticisms of this plot, at least from my perspective anyway. Of course, we do also have a brief cameo of every single incarnation of the Doctor, along with the canonisation of the Morbius Doctors, which is fun. I did like the scene, actually. I know a few people were commenting on how they've used the Doctor Who theme. I thought, if anything, that was one of the coolest moments within this season, and yes, admittedly, it was 100% fan service, but still, I enjoyed it, although I think it could have been used a bit more, which is why I think Doctor Who kind of needs a continuity checker. I kind of feel like they need a fan as a part of the writing team to oversee what is written and add in a few suggestions. It links all the way back to the 11th Doctor era. Nobody on the production team realised that the 11th Doctor was pronouncing Metebelis 3 entirely wrong. It's little things like that that kind of just make you lose confidence. And then within this story, I think the opening of the Matrix and the different visions of the Doctor could have very easily been the perfect moment to canonise some of those other incarnations of the Doctor, including David Warner from the Unbound universe. It would have been nice to see some ties with Big Finish, because Big Finish have done so much for Doctor Who over the many years, and they deserve more credit within the TV show. We had that acknowledgement within Night of the Doctor. It would have took nothing at all to bring in David Warner, and if those people don't even know David Warner as the Doctor, then who cares? Because admittedly this story referenced Barusa. Those people who don't really know who David Warner's Doctor is probably don't know who Barusa is, yet there's still that reference in there, because if you don't understand it, you can just shrug it off. All we want is just a picture of David Warner in the side, along with a few of the other external canon Doctors. It may have even been nice to see the one from, I think, the Ultimate Adventure, the stage play, added in there, or maybe even some of the other Unbound Doctors, or even the Curse of Fatal Death Doctors, because that would have been a cool twist on this story, just to bring in some of that external canon, which I kind of feel if they're going to take this plot forward, we need to have the reintroduction of another classic series Time Lord, one of which that is a companion of the Doctor. I would love to see Romana come back, for example, because probably Romana is out there somewhere. I would love to see Sean Carlson come back as Narvin, because that would be brilliant, and they could just introduce him into the TV show and just suggest he has a pre-existing relationship with the Doctor, and that is all you need to know. I kind of feel like something like that will provide an anchor to, one, the external canon, and two, the history of the show, just to make it feel less like Chibnall is going out on a whim and doing kind of what he wants. Which is something that I did come to realise when rewatching this story. It's kind of like a childish thing, but I kind of feel like there is this competition going on with the new series writers, where who can create the biggest footprint within Doctor Who history, and Stephen Moffat kind of did do a very good job of that. We had Hellbent, we had Missy, we had him doing the Day of the Doctor, at the Time of the Doctor. He did do a lot when it comes to the Doctor's past, and I kind of feel like Chibnall kind of thought, let's try and one-up him in a rather childish sense, and let's just do the origins of the show, because that would make an even bigger imprint within the show's history. It's kind of like who wrote what, and I don't know, maybe that is what he is doing, but it would just be nice to have a bit more thought put into the plot itself, and I hope to see that within Series 13. I want to see more development of the Gallifrey plot. I want to see a reoccurring face coming back from the history of the show. Maybe if it's Rassilon, this time wrote right, or maybe even Narvin or Romana, or someone that the Doctor is friends with, just to make it ever so slightly more connected to the classic series plot of the show, because at the minute it feels like it's going out on a whim. Also mentioning Jodie Whittaker's performance as the 13th Doctor, because I kind of feel like I've not touched on that, simply because we've had lots of different other exciting things going on. She once again had a good performance. I'm starting to see a Doctor, as opposed to seeing somebody acting as the Doctor, which was a prominent theme throughout Doctor Who Series 11. I couldn't really see past the fact that Jodie was acting. I could tell it was an actor acting as a character. This time round, I'm kind of seeing the belief being suspended. I'm taking her as the Doctor. I'm seeing her in the role as the Doctor more than I ever did in Doctor Who Series 11, which I just hope that is continued in the future. I just want to see more development of her. I like the fact that we have her saying within this story, "You think you broke me," all of that, that is great. Her turning around to her companions and being rather, "No, I'm doing this, you need to stay here," which Yaz still doesn't seem to be getting the point, because she has been saying throughout all the different episodes, "You need to leave," and then Yaz goes, "No," and then it's kind of, she's been proven right each and every time. The 13th Doctor is saying, "No, literally, if you come with me, you're probably going to die," which is a shame. It's likewise with Graham as well. I feel like the only companion that is actually saying, "Let's get out of this danger, let's do what the Doctor says, because she knows better than any of us," is Ryan, which, credit to him where it's due, at least he's seeing a bit more of the logical thought process than Yaz currently is. I get it that she's the friend of the Doctor, I get it that she doesn't want to go off and kill herself like how she was possibly planning on in this story. However, it's still just, could have been wrote, I think, a little bit better. But overall, the 13th Doctor, I'm seeing more potential, certainly more so than ever with her incarnation compared to the previous adventures. I'm looking forward to where they take her next, which does of course bring on to the cliffhanger for this story, where we have the possible return of Paul Condon as the Jadoon, and we have the Doctor being imprisoned in a spaceship that looks ever so slightly like Sharda, but probably isn't Sharda, which it would be nice if it was Sharda, but it most likely isn't, although it would be cool. Please bring back Sharda. Subtle suggestion. But I think that obviously you have the Jadoon in the next story. Isn't going to be Yaz, Ryan and Graham on planet Earth, very much like how they're left at the end of this story, and they need to tackle the Daleks alone. Could maybe another character be coming back? Captain Jack. So we have Captain Jack, the TARDIS team, the Doctor imprisoned, they need to get or defeat the Daleks on Earth, and the Doctor is imprisoned for the entirety of the episode's duration. Who knows? Maybe that might be the theme we're going with. It's a little bit of a prediction, but yeah, we have the Daleks popping back. We don't know when the episode is going to be airing, which to me is possibly a suggestion that this episode might be a little bit too dark to air on Christmas Day, which, not gonna lie, given that it is probably going to be billed against EastEnders and Coronation Street and all the other depressing soap operas, I kind of fail to see the point in that argument, because the vast majority of media on Christmas Day is depressing anyway and normally involves someone dying, so I think that Doctor Who would fit in very well within that. It would be nice to see Doctor Who come back on Christmas Day, because admittedly I did kind of miss it the last time it wasn't on, although it didn't really affect me too much. I still kind of felt like it was missing from the schedule. But yeah, I think that's what's going to happen in the next story. It would be cool, but who knows? Who knows where this story will lead? All I do hope is we have further development in Series 13 and more thought out stories. And there we go, we've officially done this current series of Doctor Who, with the exception of the festive special, which will hit that story when it comes to it. However, for the final time this series, let's take a look at the Doctor Who Series 12 ranking. As per usual, as time goes on, this may change. I may grow to appreciate some stories more, I may grow to hate some stories a little bit more, so this is all to change in the future. Who knows, I may do a video in a few months revisiting Doctor Who Series 12, or maybe even once the 13th Doctor era is over entirely, I might go back and look at this entire era as an order. That would be quite cool. However, without further ado, let's take a look for the final time at the Doctor Who Series 12 episode ranking. So at number 1 we have Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. At number 2 we have Spyfall Part 2. At number 3 we have Fugitive of the Jadoon. At number 4 we have Ascension of the Cybermen. At number 5 we have The Timeless Child. At number 6 we have Spyfall Part 1. At number 7 we have Can You Hear Me? At number 8 we have The Haunting of Villa Diodati. At number 9 we have Orphan 55, and at number 10 we have Praxeus. We had some smaller cut episodes in there, and we have some rather grand stories as well. I think it's quite interesting that my personal favourite story of the season is one of those episodes that is standing by itself. It's its own little fun adventure. However, it's no surprise to me that my number 1 story is a science fiction / historical story that is commentating on a historical character, because that is personally what I love about Doctor Who. However, of course, the series finale, more importantly, is quite close to the top top. If anything, the episodes involving the relation to the Timeless Child idea and the overall plot arc of the series are actually towards the top of the ranking, which I think says a lot and possibly even shows some investment in the overall plot arc of the series, which is something that I can't necessarily say for the vast majority of the Stephen Moffat plot arcs, maybe with the exception of Series 5. So that is that. That is the Series 12 ranking. I hope you have enjoyed it. As I mentioned at the very start of this review, why not leave your reviews for this episode in the comment section below, or maybe even leave your theories as to what could be happening with the 13th Doctor next. What is your general opinion of Gallifreyan history as a whole? Try and keep it to a few paragraphs. And generally, where do you think the Ruth Doctor fits into this whole idea? Would you like to see more of Jo Martin in the future? Do you think that she's going to return? Are we going to have Captain Jack within the festive season special? Comment below, what do you want to see next? I'm interested. So thank you very much for watching this review, and of course the whole entirety of this Doctor Who Series 12 episode review series. Do of course stay tuned for brand new Doctor Who content on the Host Productions every single week, as although the TV serials are of course no longer airing on BBC One, there is a whole more wider media of Doctor Who to explore, from the Doctor Who audio dramas of Big Finish, the books, the action figures, the merchandise, and everything else that I do of course cover on the Host Productions. So thank you very much for watching, and as always, I will see you all next time. Bye for now.